Tonight, the flashing economic warning signs 100 days into the Trump presidency. The GDP shrinking, hiring down, and the roller coaster day for markets after stocks closed in the red for the month. The president asking the nation to be patient.
Maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know? And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally.
President Trump saying the U.S. has been ripped off by other countries and seeking to blame President Biden for the economy 100 days into his term, while Democrats blast his policies. The Columbia University student arrested after leading pro-Palestinian protests out on bail after a judge ordered his release inside the growing legal battle. The case, a district attorney called hazing on steroids. 11 high school lacrosse players turned themselves in, what they're accused of doing. The week of deadly storms with no end in sight. 4 people killed in Pennsylvania. Rescues in Oklahoma City from floodwaters, and where threats of hail, tornadoes, and floods are on the radar next. Church and state, a landmark Supreme Court case over whether a public religious charter school should be allowed and why a Republican AG is fighting it. Laura Jarrett has the case. Legendary singer Michael Bolton shares his cancer diagnosis.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and welcome. So whose economy is it? Amid fresh data pointing to a contracting economy, President Trump is taking no responsibility for recent stock market declines or today's new data showing a 0.3% drop in the GDP in the first 3 months of the year, which analysts say is largely tied to his tariff policies. With consumer confidence plummeting, President Trump, who was sworn into office on January 20th, is laying the blame at the feet of President Biden, saying his policies, not the Trump administration, are responsible. Today's numbers don't account for the president's 145% border tax on Chinese imports, which he did acknowledge today could hurt American consumers. Tonight, what some of them are telling us. Garrett Hake has our reporting.
Tonight, President Trump looking to shift blame to his predecessor for a U.S. economy that shrank during the start of his second term.
You probably saw some numbers today. And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January.
America's GDP down 0.3% in the first 3 months of this year. Trump the president for all but 20 days of it. The decline seen as a reaction to the president's trade war. U.S. production down, analysts say, largely because so many businesses rushed out to buy imports before tariffs kicked in. Meanwhile, the president also blaming Biden for sharp drops in the stock market, posting, quote, "This is Biden's stock market, not Trump's. I didn't take over until January 20th. That's despite posting last year under President Biden that, quote, "the Trump stock market was booming because of his poll numbers." He was pressed today.
You're saying that's the Biden stock market, yet you are the president. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'm not taking credit or discredit for the stock market. I'm just saying that we inherited a mess. We came in on January 20th. So this is Biden. And you could even say the next quarter is sort of Biden, because it doesn't just happen on a daily or an hourly basis.
And the president again acknowledging his border tax on Chinese imports could hurt American consumers.
Somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know? And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally.
At a rally in Michigan overnight, arguing his tariffs are critical to boost American business.
After decades of politicians who destroyed Detroit to build up Beijing, you finally have a champion for workers in the White House. And instead of putting China first, I'm putting Michigan first, and I'm putting America first.
Businesses divided on the tariff's impact. Master Hatters in Texas makes its hats here and supports Trump's tariffs.
It's going to hurt our competition because they're buying product made in Mexico or China or wherever it's made at.
But at a beauty supply shop in Memphis, where most of their stock comes from China, the tariffs have created deep uncertainty.
As a small business, having a cash flow to try to beat the tariffs is difficult, right? Because we're very lean. The reality is some of that has to be passed to the consumer.
Garrett, let me ask you tonight, the Senate is voting on a resolution about the Trump tariffs. Exactly what are they doing?
Yeah, that's right, Lester. It's a bipartisan resolution to end the national emergency that President Trump has used to implement the tariffs. But it's all symbolic, as it would not pass or likely even be brought up on the floor for a vote in the House. Lester?
Garrett Haake at the White House. Thank you. A new report shows that China's exports have fallen to their lowest levels in years, given the trade war launched by President Trump. And as Steve Patterson reports, the evidence will soon be apparent at American ports.
The front line of President Trump's trade war with China and the 145% tariffs he put on that country is right here at our nation's busiest twin ports, Long Beach and Los Angeles.
Ports here in Southern California account for 30% of the nation's exports, 40% of the nation's imports, and about half of the business runs through China. If these tariffs stay in place, experts say it will definitely have an impact on consumers.
The worst case scenario is less choice on store shelves and online buying, prices spike, and families are really becoming tighter with their budgets.
Gene Soroka is the Port of L.A. executive director.
We only have 7 ships in port today. Okay. Normally, on a Wednesday, you'd see 12 to 14 vessels.
He says incoming cargo, everything from clothing, electronics to household goods, will plummet starting next week.
What we're seeing now is that cargo coming in from Asia will be down by about 35% until we get some semblance or signals that trade deals are on the way.
Down here at the docks, to get a true sense of the scale of the operation, one of these ships can hold up to 10,000 of those containers with goods that wind up on store shelves all across the country.
The National Retail Federation says people will soon feel the effects right in the wallet.
How much will this impact the regular consumer?
Retailers can't absorb the entirety of 145% tariff. Talk about anywhere price increases between $2,000 to $4,000 or more for the year.
And businesses by the docks are feeling the squeeze now.
It makes me sad that we have people in power that have no clue on what's going on.
Yolanda Regalado runs the popular coffee shop Sirens. Dock workers are her best customers. Their union warning the trade war could lead to devastating job losses.
Our coffee just went up $1 a pound. That's a lot. Do we add $5 for a cup of coffee? I don't want to do that because the majority of people that come in here just want a decent cup of coffee, and we don't want to gouge them.
Pain being felt at the ports from a trade war nobody here wanted. Steve Patterson, NBC News, San Pedro, California.
Now to an update on a Columbia University student activist detained by the Trump administration. Today, a federal judge ordered Mohsen Mahdawi to be released on bail as he fights deportation. We get more from Stephanie Gusk.
Tonight, Palestinian Mohsen Mahdawi is released on bail and sounding victorious.
For anybody who's doubting justice, this is a light of hope, a hope and faith in the justice system in America.
The Columbia University student, who is a legal permanent resident in the U.S., was detained during an immigration interview in Vermont earlier this month, handcuffed and removed by federal agents. Last year, Mahdawi helped lead pro-Palestinian protests on campus. In a statement, the DHS says a green card is a privilege. When you advocate for violence, glorify and support terrorists that relish the killing of Americans and harass Jews, it should be revoked. Mahdawi denies he has ever advocated for violence.
They arrested me. What's the reason? Because I raised my voice?
The federal judge ordered Mahdawi released on bail while he challenges his detention. His legal team arguing that the government is trying to silence his opposition to the war in Gaza.
This is not the first time we've seen the government go after basic First Amendment rights.
In his ruling, the judge said Mahdawi appears not to be either a flight risk or a danger to the community, adding that continuing to detain him would likely have a chilling effect on protected speech. DHS responding, the Trump administration is committed to restoring the rule of law to our immigration system. No judge, not this one or any other, is going to stop us from doing that. On the steps of the court, after 2 weeks in detention, Mahdawi with a defiant message for the administration.
To President Trump and his cabinet, yes, I am not afraid of you.
Now, Stephanie, this doesn't mean he can't be detained again.
No, that's right. He still has to challenge his detention in that federal court in Vermont. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is pursuing his deportation in immigration court, Lester.
All right, Stephanie Goss, thank you. The severe weather isn't letting up. The threat continues today for 12 million people from Texas to Louisiana. Large hail, tornadoes, and even flooding is a major concern. All this after storms turned deadly this week. Priscilla Thompson now with the latest from Dallas.
Dangerous spring storms striking across the South. A lightning strike set this Oklahoma City home ablaze, igniting a massive inferno that injured 3 people.
Boats or something else, man.
And this woman narrowly escaped her home, rescued by first responders as fast-moving floodwaters rushed in. In neighboring Texas, pounding hail and cars nearly washed away. The treacherous conditions flipping this semi-truck, the driver forced to climb out of the passenger side door to safety. The thunderstorms prompting a ground stop at all Dallas airports, as parts of the city were drenched in up to 5 inches of rain.
It's like driving through a car wash.
Up north in Pennsylvania, officials are confirming at least 4 weather-related deaths after another storm slammed the area this week.
I have never seen wind this bad.
Continuing to urge caution.
And it impacts our city in ways that we never want to see it impact. And what I ask everybody today, if you can stay in your house, please do so.
Hundreds of thousands there are without electricity after a powerful storm system uprooted trees and knocked out transmission lines. Residents in the Midwest also left cleaning up in the dark.
You couldn't see more than 50, 60 yards in front of you. We stopped in Brookville, and there was a couple buildings that had like the front roof part lifted up and blown off.
Amid a whirlwind of severe weather, with millions more still in the bullseye.
And Priscilla, the rain has stopped there, but Texas isn't in the clear quite yet.
That's right, Lester. As these cloudy skies begin to darken, there's a growing tornado threat across central and east Texas into Louisiana and for almost all of Arkansas. Lester?
All right, Priscilla, thanks. And Bill Cairns is here. It continues to be a very volatile week around the country.
Yeah, Lester, we're not expecting a tornado outbreak, but we are going to see isolated tornadoes through this evening, and that high wind threat continues, especially for our friends in Arkansas. I know Little Rock, 70-mile-per-hour winds are rolling through right now, and also isolated tornadoes are possible here in areas from St. Louis heading in the central portions of Indiana. These will all be up through at least 10 p.m. this evening. Now, as far as what we're going to deal with tomorrow, the storm system heads east. A lot of people have a chance for isolated severe storms, including western New York all the way down to Texas. But I have my eyes, of course, on Pennsylvania. We still have 250,000 people without power from last night's storms. And unfortunately, this time tomorrow, another strong line is going to go through the areas that are still trying to clean up and get power back on. So that's going to be problematic. And then isolated severe storms all the way to the south of that, down through areas of Alabama and Mississippi, too. Tomorrow's not a tornado outbreak. Damaging winds possible, large hail once again. And this will weaken by the time it gets to the East Coast. So Friday we have storms, Lester, but not as bad.
Thanks for keeping an eye on it, Bill. Appreciate it. The U.S. and Ukraine announced that long-awaited economic agreement today involving rare earth minerals. Through the deal, the U.S. will have access to some of Ukraine's natural resources. The Trump administration had pushed for the deal as a way to pay back the U.S. for aid to Ukraine. The Supreme Court today heard arguments on one of its highest-profile cases this term. They're considering whether to allow Oklahoma to approve the nation's first publicly funded religious charter school. Here's Laura Jarrett.
Oklahoma School Superintendent Ryan Walters is on a mission.
We're bringing the Bible back to school, we're bringing prayer back to school, and we're going to be the first to offer religious charter schools.
If Walters is successful, St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School would be the first of its kind, the only taxpayer-funded religious charter school in the country. Walters says it's about giving parents more choices.
It's up to a parent to decide if they'd send their kid to that school. If a parent doesn't want to, obviously, don't send your kids to that school.
Critics say this type of plan chips away at the separation between church and state and ultimately could change how funds are used for public education nationwide. Oklahoma's Attorney General Gentner Drummond, a Republican, sued to block the school's approval, pointing to Oklahoma law, which, like dozens of other states, requires charter schools to remain secular.
Oklahomans do not want to fund religious schools. They don't want the state to get in the business of funding one religion, because if we fund one, then we have to fund all. And it's just a slippery slope.
This debate now in the hands of the U.S. Supreme Court. The justices today hearing oral arguments appearing divided over the school's constitutionality. Back in Oklahoma, Erin Brewer, a mom of 2 teens, says the stakes of the high court's ruling go well beyond St. Isidore.
For the government to choose a particular religion, to force us as taxpayers to fund it, or to force us as students to study those tenets, that is un-American. I value my faith, and I have been really proud to impart it to my children, but I don't need the government's help.
And Laura, when can we expect a decision on this?
Yeah, a ruling here likely expected at the end of June or beginning of July. That's when the court's term typically ends and they hand down all the big decisions. Another one to watch for, Lester. In 2 weeks, the justices are set to take up the question of the president's executive order on birthright citizenship. That one likely to come at the end of the term as well.
Okay, Laura, thank you. We'll be right back in 60 seconds with the most read story on our website. 11 high school students turned themselves in after being investigated in a hazing scandal, putting a lacrosse team in the spotlight. Let's hear more now about those alarming allegations involving a high school lacrosse team, what prosecutors describe as a case of hazing on steroids. Morgan Chesky has late details.
Tonight, multiple members of a high school lacrosse team in New York surrendering to police after prosecutors gave them 48 hours to turn themselves in, following what the DA described as a disturbing hazing incident.
This is criminal activity. And this is hazing on steroids, okay? This could have resulted in such a tragedy.
The DA says at least 5 victims from Syracuse's West Hill High School were targeted. Younger members of the team who were tricked into thinking the older team members were taking them out after a lacrosse game.
The driver of the vehicle purportedly was lost. That was a ruse. They were in a remote part of the county, and then the accomplices jumped out of the woods, pretending to be kidnappers.
Authorities say others emerged from the woods, dressed in black, one reportedly clutching a knife, another with a handgun.
The individual had a pillowcase placed over his head. He was tied up and placed in the trunk of a car.
The DA says 4 students were able to escape. The 5th victim eventually returned home by the perpetrators, adding none were physically harmed.
I've seen the videotape of what happened to this young man. It is not a rite of passage. It is not a trivial matter.
And tonight, the DA's office telling NBC News because those teen suspects did turn themselves in, they'll be facing misdemeanor charges and not felonies. Meanwhile, that team's season has since been canceled. Lester.
Okay, Morgan, thank you. We're back in a moment with Michael Bolton's cancer diagnosis, what the acclaimed singer revealed about his health. And later, the man who took rescuing baby eagles into his own hands when we return. Grammy-winning singer Michael Bolton revealed he's been battling an aggressive form of brain cancer. In an interview with People magazine, Bolton says he was diagnosed with glioblastoma in late 2023. Treatment has impacted his memory, speech, and mobility, according to the magazine, but after surgeries and chemotherapy, his most recent scan was clear. Monday, we told you about a prank call to Shedeur Sanders during the NFL draft. Well, today, the NFL announcing 6-figure fines against the Atlanta Falcons and the team's defensive coordinator, whose son was behind the scheme, according to the team. They say he saw contact information for Sanders on his dad's iPad. The fines are for the leak of confidential information. Strong wind in Massachusetts blew a bald eagle's nest into nearby water with 2 baby birds inside. The local fire department at a nearby wildlife rehabilitation center rescued the young eagles. The fire department says the birds will be cared for until they can be released back into the wild. That is nightly news for this Wednesday. Thank you for watching. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.